yeah, it saved my life for like truly saved my life. So I thought I was going crazy, and every single doctor I spoke to was telling me I was crazy. Here's a pill. And my panic attacks were so severe, it was debilitating, and I would have multiple of them a day.
You haven't had some extreme change in life circumstance. Everything stayed the same, and the only variable was diet.
Everything stayed the same. In fact, I was going through more stress.
Today we're joined by Chad. Thank you very much for being here. How are you today?
I'm doing excellent. I'm so excited to be here. I love your channel. So
Thank you.
I feel like
Thank you.
it's an honor.
Awesome. I'm very glad to have you on. Can you give us a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, I'm Chad. Right now I am the owner of a Jiu Jitsu academy, and I'm a father of four. So my nickname became Chad the Dad, or my fight name, it's just a goofy thing. I have a very beautiful wife that I love, the love of my life, and I have become carnivore. And I guess if I had to wrap it all up, the only other thing I would say in a very brief description is I'm also I would try to classify myself as a philosopher in the sense that I love seeking knowledge, and Stoicism and Taoism are things I'm really, really attracted to, like the philosophy of a martial artist or someone who takes life in a very practical manner. So I guess that would be me, like mind, body, and soul, like jujitsu, uh, like philosophy, and being a parent. So,
Awesome. Now, you have an incredible story with the carnivore diet. Can you take us back 1 year ago when you started and like sort of walk us through the differences you noticed as time went on?
yeah, if I were to start at a year ago, I would let you know that I was in such a bad place, and I slowly started to find things that made me a little bit better along the way. But I was chronically ill for 10 years. 10 years, I was physically ill, spiritually ill, mentally ill, all the ills that you could possibly imagine. And every symptom that you could probably think of, I was going through. And I would go from doctor to doctor to doctor, and I fired so many doctors, and no one really wanted to listen. I went to like every single specialist, and it wasn't until a little bit over a year ago I saw Paul Saladino, thank goodness, getting yelled at by like this, like, I don't know what she was, but it was like the doctors panel, and they
Did he
were all
have some
promoting
show?
like a plant-based diet. Yeah, when she was that, I think she was like an attorney or something, like a cross-examiner or something.
Yeah, I've
But
seen
anyway,
that.
she
It's
was like,
crazy freak out.
yeah, she freaked out, and she was yelling like at Paul, and Paul's like, why are you yelling at me? Um, you invited me here, probably, but uh, it was one of the first times I ever saw somebody in some sort of authoritative position be like, yes, your diet is directly related to how you feel psychologically. And if there's like physiological effects in your brain that, if gone wrong, will affect your psychology. And I was like, I've been researching and looking for this for years, and I could not get anybody to agree with this. So I thought I was going crazy. And every single doctor I spoke to was telling me I was crazy. Here's a pill. And so to see him say that, and then it was the opposite of everything you find online. Because if you Google like diets for mental health, it's always either like a plant-based or vegan or lean meat type thing. It's anti-inflammatory diet, have lots of olive oil, and I don't know. So I researched every diet that possibly was known to man, and I had not heard of carnivore, or an animal-based diet as he called it. And he was the one who first got me on the idea of how did our ancestors eat, and where does inflammation really come from, and not to be scared of cholesterol. And these were all ass backwards ideas that I was not used to. It was just like, this is all like, I don't know, socially wrong, incorrect, upside down. And so allowing that to insert my like kind of like research mind allowed me to direct my like doctor Googling, and kind of get down the right rabbit holes. And that rabbit hole led to me eventually finding Anthony Chafee, who sent me on a whole nother rabbit hole. And I just got better and better and better. And so the more I was able to lean to fully carnivore, the better I got. My energy went up. And especially being the owner of a jiu-jitsu academy, it's like I do a lot. I have to be on all the time. I'm training all the time. And going with my health being so up and down, trying to keep my competitive career, my jujitsu career overall, and my business career like alive was very difficult, and it was very straining on my marriage and being a dad and things like that. So I noticed all that got better. My Not only did my crippling anxiety, panic disorder, and like my phobias just start to vanish in the craziest way, but I noticed other things, like the things I had been practicing in stoicism, went from being a struggle to achieve to being just, I guess, ease, like no resistance. What's the word I'm looking for? It was just so easy and elegant of them being applicable. And I understand how those people came to those conclusions, probably because they were on a diet more in line with what we're supposed to eat than our society. So anyway, uh, I know that was probably a long-winded answer, but and I can get into it in a lot more depth as this goes on, but immediately I started to get better and I got off all my SSRIs. I got off any medication, supplements that were supposed to help me, like ashwagandha and all these other supplements that are supposed to get rid of anxiety, but now I know just probably enhance the anxiety. Um, but yeah, I got off everything. I started facing all my fears like on a regular basis. Um, and I know this is like a weird side note, but even this summer, there's a Six Flags, an amusement park called Elitch's, about an hour away from us, and we even got season passes. And I've been doing stuff like roller coasters, which man, I used to be a roller coaster like king back in the day, but my panic got so bad the idea of even getting in line for a roller coaster was terrifying. And now my family and I have been doing that again. So it's like I've become free and I used to pray like, please help me get to just I want to feel normal for an hour. If I could feel normal for an hour, I would give anything for that. And so now that I'm here and I owe it to carnivore, it's probably why all of us become like the what's it called? Polar opposite of vegan. It's like you tell everybody about carnivore and why it's awesome and why you feel good and you become obnoxious with it. But yeah, it saved my life for like truly saved my life. So
Wow, that's incredible. Now, what you said earlier about how it's insane how like the doctors and stuff don't tell people about this, but what I think is that a lot of these doctors aren't even aware themselves. I was seeing a girl a while back and who was a psychology student, and I asked her, "Do they t teach you at all about whether or not, the foods that you're eating and how they're affecting your mood?" And she was saying they literally are not taught that even to the smallest degree. And as we see with stories like yourself, many other people it is entirely caused by diet, their mental health issues. So, like you're saying, it is insane how people aren't taught that.
yeah,
My
it's very interesting. Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, you go, continue. What were you gonna say?
Uh, I was saying it was very interesting because going through my research, it was like this is what causes mental health problems. Okay, we know these things exist like serotonin and these other neurotransmitters, and they kind of dance around it. And I finally started reading, it's like they figured out the inflammation part. You know what I mean? And why I mean that they figured it out. Like people at the top tier know this, but as it trickles down, it takes a while for the best research to trickle down and be taught in schools. But you're right. It's like they finally got to the point where it's like, okay, this is inflammation based. And then it's like this big jump of what's causing the inflammation. But what was very interesting about the research about SSRIs is I read a study in which it was saying that probably most of the beneficial effects of SSRIs immediately, like that people get like soon, is the anti-inflammatory effect of it.
Mm,
And so I was like, so basically it's an inflammatory disease. I thought this a long time ago. And I asked some doctors about it because I went to, some therapists and what they call psychotherapists and stuff like that. And they're like, yeah, probably not related to diet. And they were just right off the bat. I only heard one of them say, well, most of your neurotransmitter or your serotonin receptors are in your gut. So it would make sense, you know what I mean? That if you have
mm,
inflammation of the gut, you might, what's it called? The vagus nerve that goes up and down. I can't
mm,
remember what it's called, but she was the only person that said that out of maybe a dozen psychologists, psychotherapists, therapists, so on and so forth. So it's weird how delayed that is. It's like they know and they talk
Mhm.
about it, but they don't make like what no one talks about what is the source.
Mhm.
So,
No, it is crazy, how they'll put people on a drug in order to increase the amount of serotonin someone's making. To those who don't know, at home, serotonin is essentially a hormone that makes you feel very like calm and happy. So they'll put you on a drug to upregulate your serotonin to cure your depression, but they won't just tell you to fix your diet where, you know what I mean? 90% of it's made in the gut. It's absolute insanity. But my next question was how instantaneous were these effects? You said, your anxiety and your mood issues resolve themselves. Did you notice this straight away? Was it something that took a few months? If someone's at home thinking of starting carnivore, maybe they have started carnivore, how long should they expect to wait, do you think?
ooh, well, some things were like immediate,
Hmm.
like panic attacks. Like I noticed all of a sudden I went a few days without a panic attack. And my panic attacks were so severe, it was debilitating. And I would have multiple of them a day. And I was just terrified. Like I think most of my anxiety was waiting for the next panic attack. When is it going to come? Is it going to come while I'm driving? Is it going to come while I'm driving my kids? And I'll talk about this later, but I even stopped driving and I was a grown man asking for rides and like having my wife drive me to work and stuff because I didn't know when it was going to come. Um, all of a sudden I started the carnivore diet and a few days go by, or the animal-based diet rather, and a few days go by without a panic attack. And I start thinking, whoa, is this what normal people feel like?
Hmm.
And then I noticed right when I got on the carnivore, so I got rid of like all plants, is when the brain fog went away. And when I say went away, it got extremely less. And man, the brain fog that I had was going to get me to kill myself. And that's why, like, if I could feel normal for an hour, that's why I meant the brain fog and the anxiousness was so severe constantly. It was like I would wake up and the first few moments before it was like, okay, we got to start the day. That was the most blissful part of my life. And so that started to go away. And then once I went full carnivore, like I got rid of the dairy. So once I just went ruminant meat, salt and water, that's when brain fog completely cleared. And I have like these moments of emotion. I don't know how to explain it, where I like feel like a human again. And it almost makes me like want to cry because I was so emotionally like numb or frightened. Like I could never be truly happy. It was weird. But that happened, I would say, a week, like in my second week of going to red meat, salt, and water. But
Hmm.
I noticed probably 90% improvement by just getting rid of all plants,
Interesting.
like within the first month.
So the dairy still gave you a little bit of brain fog.
I think so. Yeah, and I tend to agree a lot more with Anthony Chafee on this. And I diverge from a lot of the carnivore community. I think I think I have a weird insight to it because I was so unhealthy that every little thing sends me in a bad direction. And
Mhm.
so for people who are somewhat metabolically healthy and they're not as sensitive as I was to these foods, they don't feel that. And so that's why I think where people are like, I do okay with dairy, but I don't do okay with this. They just have something different. And I think that my range of sensitivity and illness was so vast and intense that what ended up happening is I got a good insight by cutting things out, what was affecting me and what was not affecting me. And turns
Mhm.
out like everything was affecting me. So I think the carbs in dairy, as and you talk about this in your videos, but like the casein, the whey, and other inflammatory factors that are naturally occurring within dairy, like it's hard to demonize dairy because if you were like starving to death, like eat dairy all day. You know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
got all the things you need in it, but it just comes with some side effects of, like you're not a cow that's growing. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you don't fit that. You're just extracting some of the nutrients that are beneficial within that chemistry. So yeah, I think yeah, the second I cut out dairy, massive, massive improvements. And as Anthony Chafee says, 95% of your success will be in the last 5% of getting up everything that you don't need in your diet. I felt that. And
Interesting.
I feel not only mentally secure, I feel mentally thriving. And that I cannot believe I'm here. I used to just beg for an hour of normalcy. So
Mhm. Now, to your story, like I said, absolutely incredible, right? There are going to be a lot of people at home who almost don't believe this. You know, us being in the carnivore community for a while now, hear stories like this. But to a lot of people, the fact that you've only changed your diet and your entire perception of life has completely changed is just going to seem unreal to them. So, can I just get like just on record that you haven't introduced any drugs, you know, you haven't had some extreme change in life circumstance. Everything stayed the same, and the only variable was diet.
everything stayed the same. In fact, I was going through
Uh-huh.
more stress with a business partner split, more stress with what was going to go on with the business I decided to own and operate during a crisis. Like I
Mhm.
opened my gym during COVID,
Yeah.
and nothing has changed in my life besides my diet. I got off of my SSRI, so less drugs. I got off of my supplements, so less supplements. Um, and yeah, it might be difficult to believe, but once you start allowing yourself to go down the rabbit hole of like the proper human diet and what our bodies are capable of and what we were designed to withstand and be persistent against, to stand up against, like the early humans dealt with traumas every single day, and we all agree to that. And how did they go through that? And you start going down to that rabbit hole, and it starts to make sense that, of course, this would turn you into a superhuman because the humans, your ancestors that survived back in the day, people can't even go camping nowadays without being uncomfortable. Like
Uh,
these people, that was their daily like misery. They had to face extraordinary odds every single day to hunt and capture and gather and do whatever they needed to just exist and pass on their DNA. And that's your DNA. That's my DNA. And at home, that's all your guys' DNA. And uh it those people were able to do it because they were on the proper human diet. And it's just like lions are on their proper lion diet, but they're like super beings. They're
mhm.
badass. And you see that, and that seems natural. But remember, humans are the alpha predators. Like they were the ones doing that over and over. So it makes sense that you would be superhuman. And so by getting on the proper human diet, your body is so much more intelligent than you can possibly realize. And me going through this and doing all the research to see what the human body can do and what it's capable of on its own, like down to the mitochondria, to the cell, to the organs, and how they are all imbalanced, is changed the way I view things spiritually almost because of how intelligent it is. And if you could get out of its way and stop poisoning it, it makes sense that you become this person. And I don't know, I'm desperate to get this message out. And I imagine that you're desperate to get this message out as why people who aren't even meant to be on camera are getting on camera to say, like, you guys need to get on this diet. It's like my duty to get this out there because so many people are sick. So, yes, if you're at home watching this, please believe me and give it a try, or at least go down the rabbit hole, or get a man crush on Anthony Chafee like I did. So,
Now, with a lot of people that have the sort of the mental health issues like you, they go on carnivore, they resolve them, and then what will happen is whether they intentionally do it or maybe they accidentally do it, maybe they're out for dinner and their steak's cooked in some sort of oil or something like that. That's not
mhm.
carnivore. What happens is their symptoms come back. I'm curious, have you gone off carnivore since you've been on it, or? If you're enjoying this interview and you want to see more carnivore related content like this, consider subscribing down below.
Yes, there was. Oh God, it was horrible. Um, I went to a steakhouse and oh, it wasn't a steakhouse, it was a barbecue. But anyway, I got these steaks and I ate a bunch and it was so delicious. And I had asked them, I was like, hey, they don't cook this in any seed oils or anything. And they're like, no, 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 no. And like there might be some seasoning on it, and we'll ask them not to season it, blah, blah, blah. I was like, all right. Um, Turns out that was all BS, and I got pancreatitis that night.
Jesus.
I almost died. I champed it out because I didn't realize it was pancreatitis until they diagnosed me like afterwards.
Mhm.
I don't know what was going on, but I tried to get in the doctor's office for a couple days, and by that time I was like pretty much getting better. And they're like, "Oh yeah, you had pancreatitis. You should have gone to the ER." I'm like, "Okay." So that's good. But I was like throwing up bile. I was like all I won't get into all the symptoms because they were bad, but it was coming out both ends like every 10 minutes. The feeling was horrible because it like doesn't burn. It's like a different type of burning sensation, not like acid. But
Hmm.
yeah, so I went off of carnivore, and I guess when I say went off of, I just ate out. And it turns out, as I went back to investigate, they have a bunch of sugar in the seasoning. And so I probably overate because it was so delicious. You know what I mean? And I didn't have, what's it called? Leptins or lectins that stop you from letting you know that you're full.
Leptin, yeah, the hormone.
Leptins.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I probably way overate beyond and freaked out. And my body went from not having any sugar to probably a ton of sugar.
Mm.
And so, yeah, anyway, that was horrible. And I did up for like that week having like being very anxious
Yeah,
that
that's
entire week.
interesting,
And
that
so,
one, eh? Uh-huh.
yeah.
Hmm.
And so now, like, even when I think like, ooh, that ice cream looks good, I like remember like
Hmm.
that throwing up bile nonstop. And my poor daughter, my when I first got sick, I don't know if this is too much information, but I was going back and forth, and so I was in a horrible place. My pants were around my ankles while I'm throwing up, and I'm going back and forth. And my daughter was like, "Are you okay?" And opens the door as I'm just throwing up like an immense amount, and she goes, "Oh my God!" and slams the door. And then all of a sudden, my wife comes in. It's like 2 in the morning. But yeah, it was probably the lowest my daughter is ever gonna see me. And so anyway, she makes fun of me still for that. But yeah, it's not only was like I at my lowest, but it's like my kids saw me at one of my kids saw me at my lowest, and my wife. And so even they're like finally on board with like don't cheat on your diet. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And they're even getting on more on being on the diet with me, but they understand how serious I am now when I say I can't cheat on my diet.
Mm.
Let's not go out to eat. Let's not do, you know what I mean? If we do, yeah, it's okay if we go out to eat because we're gonna be out for a while. Like, yeah, no problem. But they know like don't even test that. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Don't trust what people say if there's things in the food or not in the food, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I was myself, I was never the most anxious person, but I went overseas for New Year's, so I was eating a lot of steakhouses and stuff, and I'm sure many of my steaks were being cooked in seed oils, and I just felt on edge the whole time. I could just feel the anxiety sort of increase just purely due to diet. So it's very fascinating for people such as ourselves that nothing in our life changes, but as soon as we have something else, we just don't quite feel as good as we usually do.
I think so. And I wanted to ask you in your opinion on that because that when that happened, I was only like I want to say like a month into carnivore. I don't know. But
Hmm.
and I haven't cheated on it since, but I always wondered if I want to go, for example, to like Italy one day. And
Hmm.
I think part of the traveling experience to go to Italy is like the food. And I was like, oh man, I love Italian food so much. Could I compromise? Could I compromise just like a week and like to get the experience? I wonder, do you become more sensitive to it because your body isn't constantly taking on the toxin? You know
I
what I mean?
believe.
So it's like, would you go to Italy and like you would just plummet right off the bat rather than being like, oh no, I'm a lot healthier now, metabolically healthy, so I should do better with this food.
Well, I think there's no like hard rule. I guess it kind of depends person to person. Like I know people
Mm,
that are carnivore 5 days a week and then 2 days in the weekend, nothing affects them. But then there are people who are polar opposites, like Jordan Peterson, where obviously he does the very strict lion diet. And as soon as he has something off his lion diet, he has this like impending sense of doom for like a month, which he was chronically depressed for the majority of his
mm,
life. But it goes to like a new level since he's gone on the line diet,
yeah.
like if he goes off it now. So yeah, I guess it would depend person to person, but there is a real risk that you are because your body's not used to it that it would affect you more. So yeah,
I
definitely be
think you're right.
careful. Yeah, I can't imagine it would go too well for you because like me, I never really thought I had too many issues, but then when I went overseas to Bali, as soon as I'm having these things cooked in seed oils, I kind of just like felt stressed and on edge the whole time. So yeah, I think it
Well,
does make you more sensitive.
I was even like kind of hinting at that earlier where it's like I went from being like so sick to now that I'm not only normal, I would say I'm thriving. And what I meant by that is all the things that people say are like, the cliches in life, like don't care what other people think and blah. I know we all say it, but we still do it. And one weird thing that's happened to me is like my mental clarity, and since that I feel like I'm better than normal. I am more emotionally stable now than I ever have been in my whole life, I would say. Even when I was at my most confident, like when I was like at my wrestling peak, I mean, in high school slash college and this, that, and the other thing. Right now it's like I don't care what people think. It's a true like liberating feeling. I don't get upset over weird things. I'm very it's very easy for me to distinguish what's in my control and out of my control. And like all these stressors and not having any obligations to anybody, things like that. But all these cliches that we've seen these famous people write about and all these philosophers kind of write down and all these poets kind of mention in their art. But I'm finally getting to that point. I'm experiencing it. So not only have I gone from like the worst, but I feel like I've gone to the best of me. So I've like not only gotten to normal, but beyond normal in a very good way. And so, like you said, I didn't used to think I used to be anxious back then. I didn't used to think that I had problems with caring what people thought about me because I was already like a pretty outgoing person in general. I thought I had already been that person, but I'm even better than that now. So I think people's baseline is so shitty now that they don't even know what good feels for them. And we hear a lot of the carnivores talk about that baseline, like it not being what they optimally could. Like I do just fine on fruit. Like I don't get sick. It's like you felt fine when you smoked a cigarette. You know what I mean? Like you didn't
Mhm.
die right then and there. In fact, you got a good feeling from it the second you did it.
Mhm.
But so they're not seeing that it's leading to the overall baseline to slowly declining. And I kind of view it like weather and climate. Like the climate's just getting shittier, shittier, and shittier, but you're gonna have warm and cold days. And it might
Mhm.
not be related to exactly what you ate right then and there. So uh if I could encourage anybody, I would say that retest out your baseline. What's the worst thing that happens? You don't eat sugar for a month. You don't eat plants for a month. Like, what's the worst thing? It's not, and as Jordan Peterson said, it's not like porridge. It's not like this tasteless thing. It's steak. It's
Yeah.
delicious. Try it for a month.
Uh-huh.
Figure out is my baseline really at its optimum? It's almost become like a religious thing. You know what I mean? Where it's like you're challenging their religion by telling them that they're addicted to food, perhaps.
Mhm.
And if I hadn't gotten it as sick as as I had become, I probably would be on their side looking in, being like, "That's stupid." But it's
Mhm.
like, just try it out. What's the worst that happens?
Literally.
You know what I mean? What's the worst that happens?
Sean Baker said the exact same. He says, try carnivore for a month. Worst case scenario, you get to eat steak every meal for 30 days, you know? So
Yeah.
there is no downside. I
See
do
if your
find
baseline really is optimal. Like, see if it is. Challenge it.
mhm. It is so fascinating how so many people are so against carnivore and they have these such strongly held worldviews. Like, they're incredibly convinced that meat is bad for them. And you sort of ask them, why do you think this? And they don't really have an answer. Oh, well, everyone knows that. That's what the studies say. Most people get their health advice sort of from mainstream media news headlines, and it's just, yeah, it's really causing great
Yeah.
detriment to society, people being so convicted in themselves without having any basis for it.
I will, I feel bad for them because it, the powers that be are very influential and more than we realize because we went from being these people who burned witches at the stake, you know what I mean, to trusting in the science and be like, okay, science tends to have the right answer. But then science became profit driven. And so they what's the word, like strongholded science, and maybe I'm using that incorrectly, but in order to maneuver the authority that is the word science to back whatever claims that they needed.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And so now you went from having a few scientists in society who are help guiding us to having a scientist at every corner saying whatever you need in order to make that company profitable. And so it was like they the science agrees with their narrative right now because that's what the profit narrative is. And that's what sucks because what's been the struggle for me is realizing not just with this, but this led me down so many rabbit holes of how many other things in society are upside down. And that's hard to go through. And as you can see, politics is like religion in these days. And your beliefs, your what's like your political beliefs. It's like you challenge somebody in a political belief where you used to just like discuss and have open discourse. It's almost like challenging their survival. It's insane. And so people become very emotionally charged by that to have those types of discussions. And so I feel like is in that where you're challenging, like maybe you might not be so healthy. You know what I mean?
Mm,
So I just feel bad for them because they've been trained almost and brainwashed that these things deserve an emotional response. And once you go emotional, that goes in the animal part, your was that your hypothalamus or your hippocampus, where you go into your fight or flight, and then rational thought doesn't occur after that. And it took me almost dying to give this a shot. So I feel bad because I've been there. I was there not too long ago.
mm.
And so it's like, what's the best way to be like, hey, you shouldn't poison yourself every day? Because I tell that to my family, and I'll tell you this later on, but they want to throw an intervention for me. So
That's funny. So the anxiety went away. You obviously, which is obviously is a drastic change to how you're feeling. But did you have any sort of changes in mindset? You know, when we go on carnivore, our hormones regulate, the testosterone increases,
yeah.
and some of the other stress hormones come down. Just in the way you see the world, your worldviews, did that change? I've been told about a study, which to be full disclaimer at home, I haven't actually checked this is a real study, that when they got liberal men and injected them with testosterone, they all changed their worldviews to becoming more right wing. And again, I don't know if that's a real study, so everyone at home, don't quote me on that one. But it sounds pretty credible. Did you experience anything like that?
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Especially with what's been going on in the United States right now. I was just feeling maybe,
Uh-huh.
you know what I mean? But I guess when you go more right wing is just because you start trusting things less. And usually the left, and the left and the right kind of change depending on what part of the world you're in, So just to clarify, like being right wing is in the United States, it's like Republican, conservative, right? Liberal, they kind of align with I guess the vegans. Like I don't think you would find a conservative who's vegan, but I bet every single vegan is going to be liberal. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? So it's like it just depends where you're at, but they're online with the environment. That's a very big deal. They're online with animal treatment, things uh that's like their pushing message. And it's always a moral based message. And what ends up happening when you go carnivore is you become way more logic based, which ends up in the long run becoming way more moral based, or not moral based, moral, I guess, conclusive. More, I don't know how you would say that, but systems that are designed to be morally fair end up becoming the result is least morally fair. You know what I mean? We've seen that over and over again. And the same thing, the systems that seem to be not designed to be morally fair, but more incentive based systems end up being the systems that become the most fair. And we find this accidentally. We didn't expect that to be the outcome. But we know that when you eat animal based, like my family of six can eat one cow for 4 months. That's one life, as compared to like the billions of bees to make almonds, or all the life to kill, all the destruction of animals and plants to monocrop, which not only destroys everything living in that area, but it also kills the soil. And I don't think people understand how important topsoil is, and that we're depleting it and how long it takes to create topsoil. And so like destroying, they're even saying that the Sahara was man-made. This because it used to be like rivers and jungle and beautiful green, and they monocropped and they destroyed it. And that's a lot to say that yes, I've become a lot more, and I've never stated my political affiliation, but I've become a lot more right winged.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's just because I've grown more distrust for the government, and it's because I've received more distrust, or I guess I've obtained more distrust in the narratives Because I used to be more left where I was like all about the environment. I was all about treating animals right. I was all about this. And it turns out the results of all that artificial morality that they're pushing is causing way more damage than we know that like regenerative farming is what keeps, the environment alive and the ecosystem alive. We know that it's carbon negative. You know what I mean? We know that way more loss of life happens in order, like these cows, especially the farmers that I go to, they have like very good lives. My wife, she works on a dairy farm, and like those cows love her. Those cows love their owner. They're all known by name, the goats and the cows. And these animal-based products are not. I'm guessing factories are not the same, but every place out here in Colorado, it's beautiful and the cows are treated extremely well. And loss of life has to exist in order to progress life. And humans, I think, have done it in the most humane way. And you cannot be on the left and start saying that making that logical. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yes. Anyway, as I've started to realize these things, I found more narratives that they seem moral on the first level, but the second you start scratching beneath the first level, you start going, oh my God, these conservatives are making sense. And then you start, yeah,
Hmm.
less government, less regulation, less involvement, less taxes. And yeah, so you have
Hmm.
a whole different enlightened view of the world and politics.
Yeah, it is interesting how as soon as testosterone increases, men tend to sort of use more logical thinking rather than emotional thinking. So that's
But
very
it
interesting.
goes up and down. It goes up
Hmm.
and down because I'll tell you this, when we get into that, when I was competing, I've always been very logical in when I've competed, but I've always been very low testosterone and very anxious and it's a reason I competed over and over again because I wasn't good at it.
Hmm.
And I was very emotional in this last competition where I've never been emotional in competition. So I was like able to engage like my animal instinct like I never have before in this last
Uh-huh.
competition. And the emotional response afterwards was incredible. So it's like the right emotions are coming up when they're supposed to and not
Yeah.
being depleted. And then I'm being way more logical in terms of like religion, spirituality, philosophy, politics.
Hmm.
So it's weird how I can regulate it on both sides.
Yeah.
So I
But,
felt that.
but like you said, it's kind of like emotional in the right sense. You know what I mean? Like you're not getting emotional over some like trivial matter. You know what I mean? You're using your emotion for a purpose, and that's to
Exactly.
win in combat. You know, which is exactly what we needed emotion for in the past. It's
Yeah, and I couldn't access that emotion before.
mhm.
It was like I was emotional at the wrong times and not emotional at the right times. It was weird.
It is fascinating. One other thing that a lot of people see, well, basically everyone sees on carnivore, pending not consuming too much dairy and pending that they actually stay on carnivore, is a drastic change in their physique. You know, it's super easy to get lean and you end up gaining a lot of muscle with the extra protein, like we talked about the extra testosterone. Did you notice any physical changes when you switched to carnivore?
Oh my God. Yeah. Uh well, I talked about energy levels skyrocketed. Um Wanting to work out goes up. Like wanting to move, the energy and the motivation to move, which is a blessing within itself. But how I look, oh my God. Like, we're friends on Instagram. I posted just some pictures, I think, this morning,
Yeah.
and I like walked by the mirror, and I hate people who take like mirror pictures, but I was like, I just gotta capture this. This is incredible. This is who I look like. You know what I mean? And maybe I hated mirror pics because I wasn't liking what I saw in the mirror all the time. And
Hmm.
uh I just can't believe that's me. I
Hmm.
look at that, I'm like, I'm that dude. That's insane to me.
Yeah.
Um, my body's rounding in the right places and it's thinning in the other right places. And
Hmm.
I don't know, I feel like that's just I was so desperate to get mentally healed.
Hmm.
Like out of all my physical ailments, I was so desperate to get mentally better, psychologically, what's it called? Healthy, I guess, balanced.
Hmm.
And then now I'm looking at my body, I was like, this is just like a freaking byproduct. That's incredible. I have energy for days and I look great. This is it's a blessing. It's weird that you can like take a medication and in this sense just diet and exercise, right?
Hmm.
And it has multiple, like, what's it called? side effects, and they're all good.
Hmm. I think
Yeah.
that's
So
almost the biggest problem I should say with carnivore is that it's almost like too impressive. You know what I mean? You see people with a long list of ailments and they go on and they're like, this is resolved, this is resolved, this is resolved. And to an outside perspective, you're like, there's no way that person's cured all that with their diet. They're lying to me. You know what I mean? It almost works too
I
good
do.
for a lot of people.
Yeah. And if we talk about this, like my sister and my mom, they want to give me an intervention. And I'm like, I am looking my best. I am feeling my best. You know, my skin looks great. I was like, when I was dying and I was falling apart, none of you wanted to intervene. You know, like, and
Hmm.
now I'm looking, like, look how I just it baffles me. But I love how I'm looking. Um, I don't care what people think anymore. So I tend to just like walk around without a shirt on a lot of the time because I'm trying to get as much vitamin D. And then I remember my wife or people, they'll take pictures. And back in the day, if my shirt was ever off, I was always like, oh, God, that's a bad angle. You know what I like? And I would be insecure. Now, all the times where they take a picture, I'm in the background, or you know what I mean? I happen to have my shirt off. I'm like, yeah, it's cool. It's like a whole new addition to your motivation and to your self-confidence
Hmm.
that you look good and that when pictures are taken of you, you look good and you're not insecure about that anymore. So that's cool.
That is cool. I'm curious myself, and I'm sure many others are curious. What does a typical day of eating look like for you?
I've been experimenting with that, especially
Hmm.
since I've only been like the ruminant meat for a while. When and remember, you say this all the time. I'm so glad that you talk about this, but the transition to carnivore was very, very difficult for me. I was just desperate, so I kept pushing through because I knew on the other side it would be okay because I trusted the science and I trusted the logic. However, it was very, very difficult. So if I were to say, what is it right now? I try to eat 1 or 2 meals a day.
Hmm.
I think I do best when I'm fasting throughout the day and I just like gain energy throughout the day. And then I'll eat my meal at the very end of the day. Because most of my jujitsu classes are in the evening. And so by the time I finish my classes, we live roll. It's like I eat, and it's like my body is kind of mimicking like having a very difficult day, getting the hunt, and finally we're eating the
Hmm.
feast at the end of the day. And it's also improved my sleep a whole heck of a ton because it's like I eat and I start to crash, and then I'm like, bam, right to bed.
Hmm.
So if it's a good day, I'll do 1 meal a day. I'll eat a couple pounds of steak,
Yep.
um, a couple ounces of bone marrow, and some homemade bone broth. And then I have some brain or some organs, depending on what's going on uh, in my cycle right then and there.
Hmm.
So that's where I'm at. And then if I eat 2 meals a day, I'll split that up. So if I eat between like my lunch class and my evening class, I'll eat a steak, an ounce of bone marrow, a little bit, a bone broth with like either brains or whatever organ, and then I'll do that same exact thing a little bit later.
Awesome. Interesting. And so so how much do you weigh? Sorry, you eat about 2 pounds of steak per day, and what's your body weight?
I'm right now, like I just weighed in at 144, I want to
Hmm.
say, but whenever I'm very strict with the carnivore, I can fluctuate anywhere from like 140 in a
Hmm.
day because like I wrestled for 2 hours and so I'm like very dehydrated and low all the way to like 147 at the end of the day, but I'm usually 142 to 144 pretty consistently.
Okay. And when you say you had a tough time transitioning, what was that? Many stomach issues? You weren't feeling amazing?
Yeah. I actually had sent a couple comments on your YouTube and you were like, go check out this video. But I think that my digestive system was so messed up. And so a lot of people, and this is a very, very important message I hope people hear, is if you're having a difficult time in that transition, and mine was a lot more difficult than what I was reading about. So I knew there's something more. And it turned out to be my gallbladder and low stomach acid. And so when I would eat, especially like overcooked meat, like I would get instant problems psychologically and physically. And if I would have too much fat, I would get a different litany of problems. And so when you start cutting out other things are very easy to digest, right? Like for example, like dairy, like I had to add dairy back a couple times just because I knew I was getting that nutrients and my body was getting that nutrients very quick. Uh, but yeah, getting my stomach acid up, so I had to supplement with the what's it called? HCl, be betaine, I'll have to look at it. But anyway, an HCl supplement with some pepsin, and that helped kickstart my stomach acid, which I don't need anymore. But and then the other thing was my gallbladder. I don't think I was producing enough bile, and everyone talks about using ox bile, which, by the way, the more you learn about that, I don't think that's a very good idea to supplement with ox bile. But there's a guy on YouTube named TC Howell, I want to say it is. If I messed that up, I'm very sorry, but he talks about fixing gut health, and I kind of go back and forth with what he says, but his logic is very sound in how to get your gallbladder kind of kicking into gear again and to get your stomach acid kicking into gear again. And he kind of helps you figure that out step by step. And so when I first transitioned to carnivore, I had a very hard time. I felt like I was dying. It was horrible. And everyone talks about being bad, but this was like, I kind of like want to go to the emergency room right now. And so then I would have a little bit of milk and I would feel much better. And then I would kind of have to reassess. And finally I found this dude. And so I got my stomach acid up, bile moving again, and now I'm full carnivore. And even switching over to the full carnivore and getting past that like 2 week mark, like the headaches went away and a lot of the illness went away, but I still had kind of like a squirming in my stomach, which is completely gone now. But it takes a while your body to naturally produce. And everyone's like, and that's a big thing. If you have gallbladder issues, don't get your gallbladder removed. Like my dad got his gallbladder removed and he thought he was the healthiest person in the world when he got his gallbladder removed. Back in the day, it was like fiber and spinach and kale and all that BS. But I think everyone can fix their body. And I finally found an article saying that carnivore can get your gallbladder, all the stones completely removed by being carnivore, by getting your bile constantly moving, and it'll destroy or disintegrate those stones that might be in your gallbladder. And then your stomach will finally upregulate the acid it's making, but it might need a kickstart. So and that sucks because when you go to veganism, you don't get any of those problems. You get like more gassy, you know what I mean? But you feel great. But a lot of people, when they go to carnivore, they're like releasing toxins like crazy. And so you have to convince someone who's not willing to go past the superficial level to be like, you're going to not feel very good for a while. And
Mm.
some of those people who have stomach acid problems and gallbladder and other intestinal problems, wherever they might be, it might be worse diving into it. But that's the first step into getting better.
Um,
And go ahead.
so I was going to say, out of curiosity, did you quit coffee during that time where you're feeling low energy? Was
Um, I lucked out because I never got into coffee.
okay.
I've never been coffee addict. I would
Uh-huh.
have some like bougie drinks if someone convinced me to have something every once in a while,
Hmm.
But I was a big tea person.
Okay.
Uh, and so I gave up tea. And tea
Hmm.
used to help me stay calm,
Hmm.
like to help me get to sleep. But
Yeah.
yeah, never a coffee person, and I never liked coffee. And from the get-go, I thought uh, ar artificially increasing energy was probably bad for the body long term. And
Mm.
chemically altering your physiology is probably not good long term. And I've always hated seeing kids younger and younger include coffee because when I was a kid, it was like coffee was only for adults. Like, can I have some coffee? You're like, no, you're not old enough. And now you see little kids at Starbucks. And this is what we talk about. It's like we see the incentive, the financial incentive always influencing the culture. You can go and be like, there's studies that coffee helps your digestive system, and there's studies that show that coffee helps your heart and blah blah blah. And like you're just making the science say what and I'm gonna guess who produced those studies. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
anyway, I remember my dad used to say, I have a glass of wine a day because it's good for your heart. Like it's whatever the narrative is, and
Mm.
truly a poison in your body every single day that creates a physiological response is probably not good. And we know coffee's a drug. Like it wasn't even hidden that coffee's a drug. It's a legal drug. And we just give it to kids now. So I assumed even when I was younger that was probably not the case. And I never drank energy drinks. I've never drinking an energy drink besides this one guy who gave me like He's like, this is like a good like electrolyte drink, and it turned out to be an energy drink, and I hated the feeling of it. But yeah, so I never liked that. I never liked the idea of drugs, um, stimulants especially, and I liked the idea of psychedelics back in the day, but using them like very far and in between, not recreationally. And even now, I'm like, I wouldn't touch anything that is not what my body's designed to put into my body.
Mhm. Yeah, no, caffeine is well, a drug and a half. Even I was thinking about, well, I definitely plan. I still drink coffee, and I've been meaning to get off it. So the other day I was like, all right, today's the day. I'm done with this stuff. And come like 9 a.m., man, I was literally just like so tired. I could barely think where I parked my car. It's like, oh my
God,
God, and like I had things to do. So I'm like, well, I got to drink a coffee. Like, I literally cannot function properly. And some people experience that for like a month. So I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm not looking forward to the day where I finally pull the trigger and get rid of it. But yeah, I
I
think
think
you,
you, I think you should.
I
I think
100%
it's a
agree.
huge thing.
It does have to go, but yeah, but yeah, as soon as I find a great opportunity where I'm not super busy, that thing's going straight away. But yeah, I definitely
It
think
was
you're
like
right.
me with dairy. It was the
Hmm.
same. Like I
Yeah.
knew I needed to get off dairy, but it was like harder and harder and harder
Hmm.
to make the pull the plug. Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people on like who well like, you are carnivore if you drink coffee, you know what I mean? But it's not part of carnivore, but it doesn't make you not a carnivore drinking coffee. But every now and then I'll see some people say oh I've been carnivore for this long and I still have anxiety. And yesterday I had a comment that said that exact thing, and I responded out of curiosity, are you still drinking coffee? Like, oh, only decaf. So I just definitely think that for many people the defense compounds that are in coffee causing problems with their mood. So
100%.
yeah.
It's one of the most defended parts of the plant.
Hmm.
And it's not like you're just having the bean. You know, it's one thing if you have like let's say you have a few almonds.
Hmm.
You know, but like almond milk, it's like you were concentrating all of the nutrients, all of the chemicals from hundreds. Like think about ground coffee. How many uh coffee beans go into ground coffee?
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And then you like hyper concentrate it into liquid
True.
form, and then you're
Hmm.
drinking it. And so your body's absorbing it like I don't know, 1,000% more than what it would have been if you were just chewing it and digesting it. Like that's why sugary drinks are such a problem.
Mm.
It's because like this powder form put into liquid form, so your body just absorbs it straight away. You know, and um, I think that's a huge issue. Yeah, coffee I think is a detriment, and it sucks because so many of these things are cultural and they're so
Hmm.
addictive that for you to ask someone to not to, they just look at you like, "What?" You're
Yeah.
like, "You idiot!"
Hmm.
And but yeah, I think you see dramatic effects by giving up coffee, giving up tea, giving up those things that are normally your staples. And one thing that helped me was like trading out bone broth. And a huge thing was not doing bone broth with acid. So like I make my own bone broth. And so I just put the salt, water, and like knuckle bones or whatever I put in there. And man, if I'm ever getting a craving for anything like that, like a sugary drink or whatever, but maybe sometimes in the morning I'll wake up and just have a cup of bone broth and then it's gone. I think what's happening is not only do you get your like immune system going, but you're getting all the nutrients in that liquid form. And so your body gets that big jump real quick of all the right nutrients right off the bat. Your electrolytes get balanced. And a lot of the time you're getting that urge because you are dehydrated. And part of the reason you're dehydrated is because you're drinking coffee or sugary drinks, right? But and so your body wants that quick energy, but the quick hydration very quickly, immediately. And so bone broth I've noticed has helped me with a ton of those issues.
Hmm. Interesting. Good advice. Now, obviously, you're a very high performance athlete. When you went on carnivore, most people would think you're not consuming carbohydrates, you're in a bit of trouble here. But I mean, as we see, that's definitely not the case. Can you talk us through your experience with how carnivore affected your athletic ability?
Yeah, and this also might actually this might have a cool influence on how to handle things emotionally as well. And I think you might have a good view because I watch your video on how it affects mental health.
Hmm.
One thing I wanted to talk to you about was about how much energy that your body uses. And so when you're consuming things like carbs, you're using up that energy. It's like gasoline. It burns very quickly, but then the fire can go out instantly,
Hmm.
afterwards. after you use up all the fuel, and then nothing's lit. But when you talk about burning fat or ketones, right? It's like burning that log for long periods of time, and you can throw as many logs on there as you want or as little at a given time. And I think one of the biggest things is our brain, it's mostly fat. And for only being, I want to say, I'm sorry if the numbers are wrong, but I think it's 7% of our body mass. And it's like, what, 25% of our energy source. So it's a huge energy source. And so your body, it becomes insulin resistant in different stages, especially your brain. And so if your brain is running out of energy right off the bat, and it keeps doing this up and down dive as it becomes more insulin resistant, like the climate we talked about goes down and down and down, that baseline goes down and down. Your ability to handle stress, it goes down and down and down, right? And so that's why I think is happening a lot with like this PTSD with soldiers is, um, I think I was in the military, and a lot of my digestive problems and my psychological problems came after being in the military. I think it's because they stressed the fuck out of you. And oh, sorry, can I cuss? Is that okay?
Yeah, why not? Go
Okay.
on.
They, I think one of the biggest problems is they stress the hell out of you, and then they feed you processed foods, and that's one of the only ways they can effectively do it. And so you're getting ultra processed food for every single meal, and you're overly stressed out. And so your body is like looking for that energy, and the ability for this glucose to cross the blood brain barrier, if I'm saying that correctly, or glutamine, however it goes, the ability for your the energy that has carbs to cross the blood brain barrier goes down and down and down. And so your body is like just being strung out, and it doesn't know what to do. Where ketones have been proven to cross the blood brain barrier and be very effective. And I think that's one of the things is we start to have this degradation as life becomes more stressful, and we keep eating worse and worse and worse with these seed oils inflaming the brain, and then carbs not being able to cross the blood brain barrier. Uh, and we are not relying on red meat and fats anymore. The brain is not getting the nutrients it needs to rebuild itself as it gets broken down by stress, which is why I think we do good as kids, because we're in ketosis as kids. Like going through uh what do you call it? Like breastfeeding and growing in those first few years of life. And then we start to slowly degrade as time goes down. And uh, one of the biggest problems about me competing was I would get stressed out and I would shut down. And I think it's because my brain just was like, we can't do this. And by the time I would go to compete, I was so anxious that my body didn't have any reserves to pull from. It was like already done. And I think I would train so hard that all my natural reactions were good enough to get me to where I got to. But man, if I was carnivore back then, I think, and I'm 33 now. And so I'm like trying to get a second lease on my competition career, maybe, second lease on life. But um, the way I felt in this last competition was unreal. There was this quote from, oh God, I'm so sorry. Anybody, you can fact check me, but I'm not even going to say the name. But this warrior says, I look forward to my battle days more than I looked forward or than my wedding night, basically. And if you know anything about wedding nights back then, it's like you got to sleep with every woman, and it was like the best night of your life. Uh, and so him going out in the battlefield and feeling that like, yeah, like win or lose, I'm about to face death and I'm going to have an opponent who's trying to kill me. That was the best thing that they could ever think of. And I was like, why do I not feel like that? I'm like a young athlete. Why do I not feel like this ever? And that quote came to me during this last competition. Like that felt incredible. The feeling afterwards, the feeling leading up to it, the feeling of like, I'm going to drive through this person rather than being scared of what this person was going to do to me. And in the competition, it was the calmest I've ever been and the most clear headed I've ever been. And I even competed blindfolded. So that was a new challenge for me is I put a blindfold on, and it didn't make my opponent very happy. So I beat this person blindfolded with no carbs, and it's the best I've ever felt. And everything he was doing, it like didn't bother me. It was very clear what I wanted to do. And then I armbarred him in about 2 minutes into the first round. And he was not happy, but the emotional release I got from it was astonishing. It wasn't me. It was like this new version of me. So I I think, like I was saying before, the brain needs ketones, especially if you're in a stressful environment, but especially if you're like in a, how do I say this? I think the military needs carnivore. Chafee talked about how his Mongolian army was Attila the Hun, I want to say. Anyway, the Mongolian army that was the biggest army with like the biggest empire that ever existed,
The
right?
Mongols,
They were
was
all
it?
carnivore.
Hmm. Yeah.
What did you say?
The Mongols, was it?
The Mongols, yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Mongols, yeah.
Hmm.
And they were all carnivore. And it
Hmm.
makes sense that they were as vicious as described. And I think that the VA needs to get on board with something like this because I think a ton of the PTSD and all these things that they're feeling, every single soldier and Marine and veteran that I've talked to has joined around the same time I did or later has gut problems. They have anxiety. And a lot of them are like, dude, I didn't even like deploy. And I have like these problems that everyone's talking about. And but they don't want to claim any of the benefits because they feel like it's unjust because they weren't getting shot at. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the biggest issues is that the body, the brain especially, needs energy and it's very taxing. Like I said, 7% of the body mass, 25%. And I could be wrong on that 25% number, but a big number, a disproportionate amount of that energy is being taken by the brain to handle stresses. And our early ancestors handled traumas every single day. They saw their babies getting eaten by lions and stuff. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
it wasn't easy. Trauma was normal. There's no reason, like, for example, and I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but like by misgendering someone, you should have that much of an emotional response. You should be able to be calm because your ancestors handled atrocious traumas in order to get to you. And your DNA is not that, like, it's not that evolved. It's still that DNA from our early ancestors. And so there's something wrong there.
Hmm.
There's something going on that the suicidality in the military is so high, where in World War II, which was a horrible war, was a fraction of what it was now. And I think we found the answer. And I was even thinking about creating a YouTube page called Making Veterans Great Again. And by helping them be carnivore and having a huge push to make veterans carnivore to help with these problems because it helped me and it helped all the stuff that I was going through.
Hmm.
So I know that was maybe not the answer we were going through, but I can confirm those things only through my experience and my experience as being a warrior, as being a martial artist and competing, of having felt what it feels like to compete as a carnivore. And it was absolutely incredible.
Awesome. That's very fascinating. It is crazy the like difference in like just perception on reality from an all meat diet to like a grain diet. Like carnivore diet Max would absolutely destroy Grain Boy Max and literally any competition of any form. It truly is. I'm pretty sure that's what the Mongols used to call the people that would they come take these people's empires, and I think they called them the Grain Men actually. So
The
that's
grain,
yeah,
that
yeah.
makes sense. They're probably a lot smaller, weaker.
Yeah, they
Like
were. They were. The Mongols were much bigger than them, much smarter, and they just come through, and these poor little grainmen in their fields would get destroyed by the carnivore army. So, yeah, that's
dude, that
interesting.
makes sense too, because you could burn all the grain and it didn't affect your food source. It only affected their food source. But I've been both. I've been
Hmm.
both. I've tried every single diet and now I've been carnivore and I've been grain, or I've been carbs. And I would beat the living shit out of the old me,
Yep.
hands down. And what was very interesting is I had faced this guy before in a competition, and we had 2 out of 3 matches. He won one and I won two, but I remember being exhausted with this guy. He got a kind of cool choke on me that I wasn't expecting, but I beat him pretty dominantly. Besides him getting that choke, he scored no points on me. I was up in all the matches. I got him in a submission. I got him by all the points. So like I beat him pretty decisively, but it was exhausting. And being able to do it blindfolded and how easy it was this time. uh, was a huge difference. So it showed the huge leap, as comparative, because I knew he was coming for blood.
Hmm.
He not only was I blindfolded, and so he wasn't liking that, but he probably studied the tape 1,000 times. He knew exactly his game plan was completely different. His style was different. So I knew he was coming for blood, but how much I got better compared to how much he got better was noticeable. So that was cool too.
Hmm. Yeah, and for those of you at home that don't know what jiu-jitsu is, it's very similar to wrestling. So you can imagine how much of a disadvantage it would be having a blindfold on. So I kind of feel bad for that poor bloke. Now, for the people at home who are watching this and they're thinking, you know what, this is incredible. I have all these issues that Chad's talked about. Maybe they've got anxiety or maybe they have none of these things, but they want to start the carnivore diet. What would your one main piece of advice be to them?
You got to go for it. You
Yeah.
got to, it's not, I'm going to try it later. It's not, I'll do it next month or when the timing is right. It's like, this is your life. There's a lot of things that make sense. Every biologist agrees that like all of our organs are meant to live to 120 years old. Even a weird thing like I want to say in the Torah, and maybe I'm mis reading this, but it says that we're supposed to live to be 120 years old. It's rare that the Bible or the Torah and science agree on something. But we are really destroying our bodies, and I don't think most people realize how much. And you could be a whole different version of you. I had phobias out the wazoo. I couldn't even drive myself. It almost destroyed my marriage, and I went. I wanted to die. I was trying to find creative ways of dying, and so like my wife and kids could get their what's it called, life insurance policy, and and live the rest of their life, being taken care of. I just don't think people, and it's just because I was the extreme case, but I don't think people realize how much they could benefit and how quickly and how well they can like how to what extreme that they could get there just by doing one thing. And it's not that hard of a thing. I mean, it is pretty difficult, but what I'm saying, it's like it's simple. You don't have to go to the top of a Tibetan mountain to talk to the monks to get the answers. You don't have to like acquire a new skill that only very few people can do. Like, what I mean? Like, you don't have to do yoga and become enlightened and drink spiritual water and all this stuff. It's like right in front of you. And it actually requires you to do less. So you have the answer, you have the solution, and it's very simple. It might not be easy, but it's very, very simple. And it gets easier and easier and easier, and you feel better and better and better. And so uh, I would say stop waiting for the right time. It's like saying when you're going to have the kids, it's like when I'm ready. You're never going to be ready. Even when you think you're ready, that's when it's going to be the worst. You're going to have kids when everything is all set up and the birth plan doesn't go right. Kids are crazy. You never use this, that, and the other thing. And all the prepping you did goes out the window. It's the same exact thing. It's like, don't have any expectations. Don't try to get ready. Don't prepare. Just do it. Make your life better, and it will get better.
Awesome. Now, to everyone at home watching this, if you're wondering, we've talked a lot about mental health in this episode. If you're wondering how the carnivore diet actually reverses depression, I made a video the other day, which I will put up on screen at the end of this video if you guys are interested. Chad, I greatly appreciate you coming on. If people want to see more of you, where can they find you? You're starting a YouTube channel. What's the name of that?
Yeah. So, I started a channel called the Jiu Jitsu Juice, and I used to have a couple big channels, and between working for the government and having clearance, I kind of got rid of it. And so I'm getting back into trying to be on camera again, and especially with my anxiety getting better. And so anyway, it's called the Jiu Jitsu Juice. I'm just going to go into about being a martial artist, try to help people get started in martial arts and kind of go through that philosophy. I think a lot of the martial arts community or the Jiu Jitsu community, especially, is kind of going down the wrong avenue, the wrong alley. And so I kind of wanted to be a voice to push it in the other direction, to make it more philosophical, more theory based. And I make a lot, I don't take life too seriously. So there's like a lot of jokes and skits on there, and I have them all backlogged. But it's the Jiu Jitsu Juice. My Instagram is chadthedad.bjj. I'll give you a link to my link tree, and it'll have everything in there. But yeah, podcasting, YouTube, Instagram, I have a lot of fun. I compete a lot, and so it's just jujitsu content. I want to be the combat carnivore, so I want to get a lot of people into trying the carnivore diet as their diet chosen diet to be an athlete. They're one of the most famous. If you're in jujitsu, you probably know the name Gordon Ryan, and he has had health problems out the wazoo. And they just released like this big thing not too long ago about what's the optimal diet for jujitsu, and they're all like, you could be on any diet. And I was like, if you're 20 and on steroids, maybe it won't affect you that bad. But I bet Gordon Ryan's issues would go away instantly if he tried the carnivore diet, for
Hmm.
example. And
Does
he's the best. Go ahead.
does Gordon Ryan still have issues, or has he resolved them
Oh yeah,
recently? Did
yeah.
they?
The digestive issues, they kind of go up and down because he tries new supplements and they probably have a temporary
Oh,
anti-inflammatory
okay.
effect on him. But yeah, if he went carnivore, it's like I bet I could fix Gordon Ryan's stomach issues. And
Hmm.
then his performance enhancers would only increase at that point. Because I know a lot of these being able to run on ketones is one of the biggest endurance enhancers ever to
Hmm.
enhance your endurance. So anyway, yeah, that's all my stuff. So if you want to go, I'll give you the link to my link tree, and
Awesome.
yeah, I'll have all my stuff on there. But yeah, go follow me on Instagram, and I'm excited to get back into being on social media, or I guess on YouTube.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.